So your comment, which we see in the data, right, and all the research, is that direct publisher acquisition is always going to have a greater sense of assurance and perform better, right? Whether it's in view, et cetera, right?
Yes, what I'm seeing every day.
Okay, so I would never suggest that inherently media agencies are lazy, having come from one.
Right.
But they're being asked to do more with less. So does that mean that there's going to be perhaps a predisposition to default to buying less at a higher CPM and buying direct? Because then you can transfer the burden of accountability and policing to the publisher. You know your inventory. Do you think that that's a reasonable conclusion to draw?
No, I don't, because I think no technology is going to solve this, right? And just going with tier one is still not going to solve it, because I do believe that every impression, it needs to be measured. There can't be any non-human traffic. So I don't think you can just rely on a publisher. I can't rely on a verification vendor. It has to be a blended approach in order to go to market. It's not going to be flip a switch and then suddenly that problem's going to go away, because it's going to be less work for me to go to market and remediate it as well.
Right. So on the front end, when you're actually trafficking a buy, let's stick to video, right? What are you doing differently today if you have, on behalf of your client, if you're using some of the auditing and measurement service, like the policing services, the anti-fraud services?
Yeah, and this is complicated because, one, it's going to be dependent upon a vendor on whether or not you're going to be able to block or monitor. Not everyone is going to agree to those things. So it's going to be...
To be very specific, when you said vendor in that context, you meant the publisher.
The publisher, yes.
Okay.
Right, so the publisher, you're going to agree to that up front, and that's going to determine your workflow based on that. So if blocking, and you're going to block for non-human traffic, that's going to cover off on a majority of other things. But there are other metrics that our clients are looking for in terms of viewability, in terms of geo, a number of other things that you're going to have to account for, and not any of these technology vendors are going to pick off everything. So that's
of course
always going to be an issue, and that's going to impact our workflow.
Okay, so let's assume that that your client is a very bullish, pro video, tier one, tier two, et cetera, media buyer, and they have deployed a viewability, a non-human monitoring platform, as well as a partner that addresses brand safety. Say they got the whole gamut covered, right? How much harder do you have to work to actually reach their numbers?
I think it's inevitably going to be more work, because
for you or for the publisher, who's doing that work?
Both.
Okay.
I don't think it's one-sided. It's
okay.
got to be both sides. I think as this industry evolves, there's going to be we're using two different measurements. Quite often what's going to happen is they're going to use a different verification vendor than I will, and therefore we're going to have some sort of remediation or discrepancy or something we're going to have to work through. So barring that, it's going to be more work for both parties. I don't know how you can have more work for both parties.
Okay, so that remediation or sort of reconciliation, which is so much more complex now than just whether or not things were delivered. Do you believe that eventuality, these third parties that are monitoring and policing or measuring, are they eventually going to become sort of intermediaries that or we could have a consistency where you've got a publisher that has one partner, likely a buyer that has another partner, and then they just have to duke it out and find somewhere in the middle? Because it's pretty easy with Dart, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It always defaults to the buyer.
Sure.
I mean, it may not work like that in Europe, but in the US it makes buying a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a little bit of that, but I think that there are times we're going to leverage that resource because we have to, and hopefully we get agreement on that. If not, it's something, I see myself and some others in my team being able to do that as well. So I don't see this as two separate things. I think we're going to rely on their resources to do it, and we're going to have to participate in that as well.
Okay.